computer. Okay.
Okay, so, yeah, got it. Okay, this is the webinar by Dr. Ailis Brosnan. I want to welcome everybody here, and to people who will be watching it, thank you for tuning in. Over to you, Ailis. Take it away. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dennis, and thanks for having me on this evening. I'm delighted to talk about anything plant-based and vegan. We've a nice small group here as well, so feel free to chime in with any questions as we go through the session. I want, you've all come on here for a reason, I suppose, and want to make sure that you kind of get what it is you want out of the session. So feel free to chime in, and I'll do my best to respond to you if I can. So I'll just put up my slides there and share them. Just as a matter of interest before we start as well, are you all vegan on here? Are you all considering? Are you all transitioning? Are you all, where are you all in your journey?
I'm vegan anyway.
I'm vegan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm vegan. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Roger.
Hiya, hi everyone.
Perfect.
I'm being the best vegan I can, I think, yeah.
Yeah, just to get a sense of who we have and where you're at. And like I said, there's no, I've heard all the questions over the years, so there's no such thing as a silly question, or more than happy to try and answer anything that you have for me. So can you see my slides there okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Perfect. So if you give, but many of you are, I'm new too, so just to give a brief, I suppose, introduction to myself. Vegan since 1997. I think that adds up to about 25 years or somewhere in and about that. And prior to that, I was vegetarian really since I left home. I just felt like the right thing for me to do. And I suppose even with going vegan, this is pre-social media and pre-internet and everything. So it really, again, it just really felt like the right thing. The only thing I can go back to is I had a little leaflet from the Vegan Association in the UK, and there was information on that. So that would have been some information I would have gathered, but it just felt like the right thing on every level for me. And I was living in California at the time, and ice cream and muffins were the last to go. But when I found vegan muffins and vegan ice cream, happy days, I was on a roll. Became a little bit more challenging when I moved back to Ireland, and my partner at the time was the only person I knew who was vegan for the first 10 years of my journey. So it was kind of a lonely place to be, I suppose. Very, very, very different to what it is now. Also in terms of foods and availability and so on. But anyway, that's me and where I am at. And I have two thriving kids who were vegan from birth. They're now 9 and 13 and still alive and still with us, and never at the doctor's. So again, all going good there. I suppose in terms of career-wise then, health and fitness has been my passion all my life. I grew up in a sporting family and always been active, and still am, as I turned 51 this week, and just love being active in the outdoors. That's kind of my thing. And I suppose my love of it became my career. I went on and did a degree in sports science as my primary degree. Went on then and studied health promotion, nutrition, exercise and stress management, and thought I knew everything. Now I could go out and change the world and get everybody healthy and fit, and realised there was a big gap between, I suppose, what we know we should be doing and what we're actually doing. And that's what prompted me to go back then and study health psychology. But I'm all studying still, even. So I'm always doing different certs. I've done the Cornell plant-based nutrition, I've done raw food instructor, and various fitness ones as well. But I love learning. Always be on YouTube, listen to various different plant-based talks and different things. So that's me, and I have my own business. I do a lot of health coaching one-to-one. Primarily, I suppose, helping people transition to a plant-based vegan diet. And I have online self-study programs for that as well, and work a lot mostly with women. It just happens to be that way, and I do a lot of online programs and talks and so on as well. So that's me. Enough about me. So people, when they hear what I do and that I'm kind of plant-based wellness, they just think I spend all my time in the kitchen. But I don't. As much as I love healthy, delicious food, my first love is being active in the outdoors. As you can see here, I'm kind of into everything and anything that involves moving. So for me, that means that my food needs to be quick and easy and yet healthy and delicious. And it has to, I suppose, sustain me as well through my activities that I do. I've just completed a half Ironman last weekend, and always, I'm training now for an ultramarathon. So there's always something on my agenda, and my food really fuels me for that. So that's me, and I suppose I checked in just briefly with some of you there at the start in terms of why you're here. And I suppose why you've given up an hour to be here tonight, hopefully to pick up some pointers for yourself, and hopefully you will. But I suppose when it comes to why people are moving towards plant-based or vegan diets, there's a mix of reasons, and I suppose we're all here for some mix of these. For when you look at some studies, and again, these are very studies you can always take with a pinch of salt and use them, as they say, as a drunk person uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination. But at the same time, these are the common, I suppose, things that draw people in. It can be for health reasons, it can be for animals, it can be for the environment. But generally what I find, no matter what avenue people come from, they start to become aware of the other reasons. And that's what I love. And I suppose a lot of the people who come to me, it's a mix of health and animals. They just, wake up one day and realize that's it, and they can't go back. So, and again, then they start to realize the environmental benefits and so on. So it generally can be a mix. What research will tell us too is that, if people come kind of from an animal rights perspective, they tend to stay more committed and stay being vegan longer or for life. Whereas people coming on for health reasons sometimes can come and go a little bit. So that's kind of interesting. But I do find that once people come in and start to become aware, and very much how I work is very much about education and informing people, so they can make informed choices and creating that awareness. And I think once you become aware, it's very hard to become unaware, and that tends to be what happens. And I think, I know that the focus tonight is from a health perspective, and that's, I suppose, my strength, my skill set, and probably I'm sure many of you on the call are experts when it comes to vegan and in terms of, I suppose, the climate and in terms of animals. But I think Brenda Davis, she's written a book you might have come across called Becoming Vegan, and I really like her style. She's very evidence-based, very scientific, but yet very compassionate and inspiring in the way she presents her message. But one of her quotes I like, it's just reminding ourselves, I suppose, that our food choices have consequences. Not just for ourselves, but beyond ourselves. They have consequences for other people growing our food. They have consequences for the animals and the planet. And I suppose it's just a reminder on that being vegan is not about personal purity. It's about making more conscious and compassionate choices. And I suppose that's very much where I would come from. And I really kind of like how she's phrased that. So I suppose, as I said, the focus tonight is on a plant-based diet, and we'll talk about how I know I use the plant-based and vegan interchangeably, and they're different, and I'm aware of that, but I will clarify that in a moment. But just to say, it is from the personal health perspective tonight that the talk is on, but I'm very, very, very aware and very motivated by the other benefits of a vegan diet as well. So I suppose just differentiating for those of you who, I know most of you are vegan, but those who you might be new, I suppose the difference, but as a vegan diet, we're eliminating all animal or animal derived products from our diet. And I suppose the difference with that and a plant-based diet would be eliminating these, but it would be full and of fruit, vegetables, nuts, legumes, grains. So it would be very much a whole food plant-based diet. Your diet is based on basically eating plants. So you can be vegan and not necessarily be plant-based. So as it says here, I can stay healthy by following a strict vegan diet, nothing but coffee and cigarettes. As we know, you could be vegan eating Oreos and crisps, and there's so many accidental vegan foods and so many junk vegan foods now, which are there and available. But I suppose what I would be advocating, yes, go vegan, number one. That's the first thing we need to sort. But if you are from a health perspective, you definitely want to try and make it whole food plant-based. So hopefully that makes sense, and I'm sure it does to most of you. But anyway, just chat, ask questions or pop them in the chat box if you want. So what I get, and not as much anymore, I think we were realizing, but definitely 10, 15 years ago, you know, when people said, well, you know, it was kind of where do you get your protein question? It was like, what the hell do you eat question? You know, people just couldn't comprehend, you know, how you could, especially living in Kerry, in a dairy county, in a dairy town that I'm in, couldn't comprehend what you could possibly eat if you didn't eat meat and dairy. But, you know, the variety, and nowadays particularly, it's just phenomenal, and we were just spoiled for choice in terms of what we have available. So I suppose my message tonight would be that if we have that choice, you know, from a health perspective, it's really worth trying to make the effort to make it whole food, plant-based. And I suppose another angle that I take with this too, obviously, you know, I want to eat well, to live long and live healthy, and to enjoy my activities. But I also find that I'm a living example of someone who's been vegan for a long time. So I see it as kind of nearly a responsibility in myself to be thriving and to be healthy and to be out there and able to do all that I do, and to be a good example of a healthy vegan as well, to show that it can be done and it can be healthy. As I'll show you, you know, in a moment. My parents weren't too impressed 25 years ago when I told them I was going vegan, but yeah, I think if you can kind of be out there as a role model and inspire people of how great it can be and how you can thrive in it, that's a very positive thing in my book. So what we're going to kind of touch on tonight, and slow me down, I do talk quickly, and then particularly Laurie with the Irish accent, you might be struggling a little, hopefully you're not, but do tell me to slow down if you need to. But we're going to look at kind of, I suppose, these are some of the kind of the myths that I used to hear a lot of. Again, the fad one is reducing now. I think people realize this isn't you know, it's not a diet, it's not something that's coming and going. The other thing was about the health, and you still hear that, you know, it can't be healthy, and there's still a lot of industries out there trying to spread that message, even though it's far from the truth. The protein question, I'm sure, you know, you've all been asked a million times. And if we've time, then we can just look at a few other kind of nutrients that we just need to be mindful of. So is it a fad? Well, absolutely not. You can see here, even if you look at the Google searches over the years, you can see how the interest in the blue line is veganism. The searches, you know, in veganism has increased over the years. It's not showing any signs of decreasing. It will see a big spike every January when you kind of zone in on this in more detail. Usually every January with Veganuary, it takes a big increase, and then it'll drop back, but it's always kind of heading in the right direction. It was kind of about, I suppose, 2012, 13, it kind of surpassed vegetarianism. And before, I suppose, the journey, and for those of you who are vegan a long time, probably took this journey as I did, you know, we're vegetarian first, and then transitioned to being vegan, but the journey now just seems to be going straight to being vegan. And I think that's probably due to parties like yours, and, you know, social media and people raising awareness, you know, and you can see things through social media and videos and clips and things that can really open your eyes a lot quicker than maybe you might have before. So I think people are just kind of realizing, and then suddenly, you know, making that jump. So yeah, I mean, there's headlines. I'm sure you've all seen these, you know, no matter what country you look at, you know, even Veganuary just on the rise every year, you know, all the signs are there that it's not a fad, it's here. And more and more people are going, you know, joining the revolution, or joining the movement, I suppose. And everything, you know, from food products and from food industries. I even saw on Facebook today, Kerry made, you know, a dairy organization, running a webinar on plant-based foods and the future of plant-based foods, you know, so it's just constantly amazes isn't the right word. It constantly just, I suppose it is. It's amazing. It's fantastic to see, I suppose, the continued increase in the interest and changing world, I suppose, and the way things are moving. And I suppose, you know, back, I suppose 10, 20 years ago, a lot of it would have been the awareness raising would have been coming through books, which was a kind of a slow process. You know, a lot of doctors, you might be familiar with them, Laurie, in the US. You know, I was lucky enough to work with Dr. Dean Ornish many years ago in San Francisco, and I suppose that influenced me too greatly, seeing seeing his program to reverse heart disease, and it was the first kind of lifestyle-based program that showed that not only could heart disease be stopped, but it could actually be reversed. And he was using a plant-based diet, meditation, and exercise. But it was kind of seeing firsthand these patients that I was, managing the records for, and seeing the improvements in their stats, and then meeting them in person and seeing how their lives had turned around. So, it's amazing pioneers like that are out there doing amazing research and sharing that, I suppose, with the world as well. A lot of celebrity vegans, they kind of can come and go, but I think overall, in the most part, they tend to have a positive influence, particularly on the younger people, and that is the largest percentage of people going vegan are in kind of the 18 to 35-year-old group, who are obviously generally quite influenced by these influencers. But then documentaries and social media, I mean, you've all seen many of these, and just I haven't been able to keep up with the documentaries anymore. There's so many out there, which is fantastic. And again, many of them taking different angles from, but all, I suppose, with the end result of creating awareness and interest in plant-based vegan diets. So, and I suppose even the media in Ireland, which again, 20 years ago would have been mind-blowing to kind of believe, but Claire Byrne, Pat Kenny, so many of the shows kind of taking on the issue, and maybe not reflecting it or representing it in the best place, but that their shows about entertainment, but at least the topics being aired and giving a little bit of a platform, and again, even in the papers as well. So I suppose it's just all reinforcing that it's it's here to stay. Kerry Group even we're doing I think the vegan cheeses for McDonald's or something like that. That that's all kind of realizing they need to come on board. And even seeing this article in the Irish Times, is just amazing. That a national Irish newspaper was publishing articles and creating awareness like this was amazing to see. So the future is vegan. I strongly believe it, and I think the trend that we're seeing is just up and up, and I think everybody's realizing it. And as much as some industries still might fight it, I think there's definitely more of an embracing than a fighting starting to happen, and a lot more work obviously to be done, but I think we're moving it in the right direction. So the other one, I suppose, and any questions so far? You're all still with me? Just shout if there is. So I suppose in terms of the health question, like I said, when I went vegan 25 years or so ago, my parents weren't overly impressed. And I suppose back then they didn't really know anything other than I wouldn't be eating meat, which was essential for survival, and I wouldn't be consuming dairy. And the only, I suppose, role model they had back then, I don't know if many of you remember Coronation Street and this character called Spider, and he was vegan way back then. But he was the only, I suppose, person that they knew that was vegan, and he was a little bit shady, wasn't the healthiest looking. So yeah, that was all they had for a frame of reference. But as I said, that's changed, and again, loads of doctors embracing it. Even here in Ireland now, there's a plant-based doctors association set up a few years ago, and the message, again, slowly it's getting out there, but it's slowly getting out there, and you can see that the I suppose the perception of what a vegan is has changed massively as well over time. And I suppose, looking at it, from a kind of a scientific or an evidence-based perspective, pretty much all the dietetic associations around the world all have given support for a vegan diet, a well-planned vegan diet, I should add, because that would generally be the phrase that's in there. So, the American Dietetic Association and the Dietitians of Canada, it's one of the largest organizations, they say a well-planned vegan diet is appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, including during pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, and adolescence, which is fantastic to see. Our next door neighbours, British Dietetic Association, a well-planned vegan diet can support healthy living in people of all ages. So the same thing again, both using the term well-planned, and I suppose that's what the message I'd be hoping to get across tonight as well. Again, the Academy for Nutrition Dietetics, we're one of the few to acknowledge the environmental sustainability of vegan diets. and also the risk reduction in terms of various different health conditions. And they even go, they in detail in the article about them, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, certain types of cancer, obesity. So, the research is there, and the endorsement, I suppose, from dietetic associations for the most part is there as well, which is fantastic to see. And it gives a lot of reassurance. I have a number of parents come to me who might be vegan themselves. And I know this was a thing for me, when I was vegan pre-kids, I was kind of winging it, to be honest. I wasn't taking B12. I wasn't supposed to fully aware. I was kind of just doing what I could. But once I became pregnant, I wanted to have a healthy pregnancy, obviously, and then I wanted to have healthy kids. So my kind of nutrition knowledge went up a big notch when, responsible for others as well. So that's what I find a lot of parents who come just kind of want that reassurance. And when they know that, dietetic associations have endorsed vegan diets, and it kind of contracts some of the fears that might have been fed into them from concerned family members and so on. So I suppose also from a health perspective, and again, I love the Blue Zone studies. I don't know if any of you have come across them, but when you can look at things in a few different ways, I suppose. So, from the position statements and the, dietetic association support to individuals, loads of, a folder of loads of research articles in terms of the health benefits of plant-based diets. But then if you look at population-based studies, and that's what this one is, and basically Dan Butner was curious, as I myself, in terms of how do people live healthy and live longer, and what are their secrets. And he teamed up with the National Geographic Association and the National Institute for Aging in the US, and went about researching this. So they identified a number of communities throughout the world where not only were the people living longer, but they were living healthier. And they identified 5 communities, and they wanted to explore then, what is it that's enabling these people to work till they're 100 and keep doing what they love to do, and keep active in community, and keep contributing to community, and keep doing what they love to do. And, I was delighted. I took up bodyboarding at 50, but this guy's 99 and he's still surfing. So, there's people out there, and I'm always inspired by them who are doing this and living well, into old age, active old age. So what they discovered was what we call the Power 9. And these are 9 commonalities between these various different communities around the world. And they were kind of, across the different areas, obviously exercise, which we'll talk about for the whole night as well. And they had lots of things in relation to sense of belonging and connection to, your family and your wider community. But they had 3 that were in relation to food. And you can see them down here. The 80% rule, so eating till 80% full. Wine at 5, which I love to embrace and enjoy. One glass of wine is what's recommended, 1 to 2, but anyway, that's a whole other talk as well. But plant slant was the big, from a nutrition perspective, what kept these communities living healthy and long lives was that they had a very strong plant slant, that they were eating, 90 to 95% of their diets were beans, whole grains, and garden vegetables. So they were eating pretty much a plant-based diet. And these are the communities that are living long and healthy. So I think that in itself speaks volumes if we want to know, what diets are good for us. I also create any questions. I just see a comment there in the chat box. You didn't supplement, Roger. Yeah. I'll come to that actually, Roger. I have a couple of slides in B12, and it is very important. And I suppose the quick answer now, just in case we don't get to it, is yes, I would absolutely recommend B12 supplementation. Primarily because the risks of it are so high that it's not worth taking that risk. And I know I did for many years, unknowns to myself, but just because the risks are high, it's, with other vitamins and minerals, you can get away with it a little bit, but B12 deficiency, it can be serious. So I would recommend supplementation. But I will come back to talk about that a little bit more, Roger. So I suppose just another angle then to look at, I suppose, in terms of plant-based diets and how healthier they are for us. And this one is bringing a little bit of the climate and the environmental piece as well. And you might have heard of the study. It came out in January, I think it was 2019, and it's the Lancet Eat report. And what I love about this study, and as I said earlier, research you can kind of pick and choose, but this study was done. I think there was 36 different researchers involved, over 16 different countries, and they weren't just dietitians, they were social scientists, they were environmentalists. It was a really big, massive collaboration, and also it wasn't sponsored by any particular industry. So you can kind of relax a little bit and read it not knowing that. And really, really interesting report. But I'll give you the skinny. You don't have to read it all. It's quite long. But the skinny of it is, and again, this is their question, I suppose, just to go back, is what's the best diet for health, but also for the planet? Okay, which I think particularly in the last week or so, hopefully people are realizing more and more and waking up more and more, but it does seem to be a slow journey. But this is what's the best food diet for our planet and for our health. And what their summary is that basically global consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes will have to double. And consumption of foods such as red meat and sugar will have to be reduced by more than 50%. So at a minimum across the board, the whole population, this is what we need to be doing. And again, so no matter where you're looking at, whether it's an individual research paper, it's the dietetic associations, it's how are people living long and healthy, our reports like this, they're all giving the same message. As it says there, a diet rich in plant-based foods and with fewer animal source foods confers both improved health and environmental benefits. So really strong message there. And again, if you're visual like me, this really helps. Basically, they're saying that half your intake over the course of the day should be fruits and vegetables. And if you forget everything I share with you tonight, if you remember that one thing, you'll be doing tremendous things for your health. If you start to just increase the amount of fruits and vegetables you're eating, you'll be doing wonders. And particularly your green leafy veg, they're so nutritious. So that's probably your biggest takeaway, because you can see, over the course of the day, this should be half our intake. And I can guarantee you, very few of us are there, and myself included. And I remember even asking at a Veg Fest event in Cork City Hall, 200 more probably people in the room, and primarily vegans, vegetarians. So you think we'd be eating a high portion of fruit and veg. And I asked how many people think they consume half their intake as fruit and veg. And it wasn't half the group, it wasn't a quarter of them. It was one guy in the back in a red jumper who put up his hand. So again, we're very far removed from this. The research tells us, the World Health Organization, like the Irish guidelines recommend 5 to 7 servings a day, which is actually very low. And there's a number of reasons why it is low. I won't go into those tonight, but the research is telling us 10 plus, at least, if you want to look at it from a serving point of view. But I think, to me, a half your intake is probably an easier way to remember it. So just a big thing to keep in mind. And there's lots of ways you can do that. So just bear that in mind. And I suppose, again, just some of the other things, and I know we're not going into the environmental aspects tonight, but, just hard to go by without mentioning that, what also could be benefited in terms of the number. They did identify the number of lives in the Lancet report as well. Was it per year? And I'm not going to say because I'm not 100% sure, but it was massive in terms of human lives. But this is a different study here. And you can see there, some of the major benefits, I suppose, as well. But I know I'm talking to the converted here as well, so we'll move on. But in terms of, I suppose, health as well, if you look at the various different conditions that are out there, heart disease, one of the biggest killers in Ireland, across the globe, really, I suppose, as cancer and so on. But I just give a quick skim through just to show you some of the research that shows us how plant-based diet can benefit preventing these illnesses and diseases in the first instance, but also as a treatment modality as well. And there's some amazing research done on this as well, and shared in lots of physician journals, which is great to see as well. But this is a combination of studies. This isn't one particular study, but it's pulling research from various different studies. And again, at a very quick glance, you can see that those who are eating high percentage of plant-based foods, so a lot of your Asian countries and so on over here have very low rates of heart disease and cancers, and vice versa. Countries where There's low intake of plant-based foods, very high rates of heart disease and cancer. Excuse me. So at a glance there, I think that's very clear. One that really struck me, I don't know if any of you've seen the documentary Forks Over Knives. It's probably, gosh, a number of years old now, but a really good one on Netflix if you haven't seen already. It's a good one I recommend to people who are kind of on the verge of thinking of going vegan or considering it. It's kind of a gentle enough, but it's kind of some striking messages in it. But this is one that hit me. It was one of the doctors I mentioned earlier, Dr. Esselstyn in the US, a heart disease surgeon, and he shared this slide in that documentary, and he was basically talking about the study where they tracked heart disease and stroke over the years in Norway, and they could see the increase year on year, and then around the time of the war, you can see heart disease rates drop dramatically, and this was attributed to the German armies coming in and taking the livestock for to feed their own armies, and Norwegians had to go back to eating more plant-based and more vegetables from the land and so on. But what I think struck me the most is one, the massive drop, but two, how immediate it was. And even just listening to earlier in the week, Brenda Davis, the dietitian, doing a lot of work around diabetes, and she was saying even within 2 weeks of moving to a plant-based diet, they were seeing changes in the biological markers of people with diabetes. So that's what's fascinating too, I think, is how quick these changes can occur. It doesn't mean, that you won't see them for, a year or two, or, but it's these changes that people can see are can be very immediate. So I thought that was interesting from that perspective. So yeah, it's kind of simple message comes out of it. Heads you get a quadruple bypass, tails you eat your veggies. It's obviously a little bit more complex than that, but they do go a long way to improving your heart health. In terms of cancer, again, you probably have heard of the China study and great work that Colin Campbell has done. Again, I suppose what I like about this study is that you're talking about a lot of subjects, and basically they were mapping cancer rates in China, and so there were massive differences between some states and the other states in terms of cancer rates, and so they went back and then did a more in-depth investigation to why, and really right down to kind of food diaries and so on, very in-depth investigation then, and basically a lot of it, and most of it came down to diet, that those states that were eating, a large proportion of their diet was plant-based, had much more rates of breast cancer, cancers of the digestive tract, and low rates of blood cholesterol. And again, in their studies, very much like an on-off switch with cancer tumors, that as soon as people introduce dairy, or animal-based protein into their diets, it was like turning on the tumor, and as soon as they omitted it, it was like turning it off, and really very much immediate effects, which is again quite interesting. And again, I could spend all evening going through even one of these conditions and the amount of research that's behind them. But even with diabetes, they're finding that a plant-based diet is more effective than the American Dietetic Guidelines, in terms of improving and allowing patients to reduce their medication and so on. So across every illness and disease, really, there's just tons of interest tons of research and evidence. Even as I'm getting to this stage in life, I've been researching menopause, and again, finding some fascinating studies. Plant-based diet, rich in soy, reduces menopause symptoms by 84%. Some massive improvements, and this is something that's very topical these days, and that a lot of people suffer from symptoms for. And again, touch wood, but I'm like sailing through it, and I attribute it to my plant-based diet. And it definitely clients that I work with, again, they're mostly women, and I do find that they have less symptoms when they go plant-based. It reduces their symptoms, it really does. So, but again, study our research here backing that up as well. And not only do we live healthier, but we live longer, and as you can see through the Blue Zone studies as well. But and again, this is compiling research from the Seventh-day Adventist research, but living on average 6 to 10 years longer, but living healthier, which is the big thing as well. So lots of information there, but I'm sure you're probably familiar with lots of it. But any questions or comments, pop them in the chat box or just share with me now. I suppose just to reinforce as well, you wonder, well, if this is the case and all the research is there and all the evidence is there, why, aren't our Irish guidelines reflecting that? And I suppose, again, there's a few reasons, but Canada and I suppose, Australia tend to be ahead of the game when it comes to health. But you can see the Canadian, this is back in 2008 now, which is 4 years ago, already their plate was very much reflecting what we've spoken about tonight. And they've, included pulses and beans, nuts, seeds, and so on in their dietary guidelines as well. But again, half the intake fruit and veg. So it will come that way in time. Our Irish guidelines were reviewed, gosh, what year was it now? It was pre-COVID, I think December 2018. So they have improved, they've moved the fruit and veg to the bottom shelf, which is a good thing. But again, there's a long way to go yet, but they're improving. I suppose every restoration is improving. And I suppose the difficulty with guidelines that you see too, and research, is that it takes a long time by the time research is done and published and reviewed. And then by the time a government organization, I've been involved in developing national guidelines in other areas around physical activity and so on, and it just can take years for groups to work together to produce the guidelines and get them approved and get them finally out there. So there's a big lack of time, I suppose, between research and guidelines. But I think we'll see the next reiteration more aligned to whole food plant-based diet, hopefully. So are we all doing okay still? Yep. Smiling still, anyway. Okay, so feel free to chime in. Lots of you, I'm sure, have tons of information as well to share that's probably very relevant and of benefit to the others. So feel free to pop in as well. Dennis says, is there any chart or guide per 24 hours how much nutrients are lost per fruit and veg? I haven't come across one, Dennis, but really, yeah, it'd be interesting. I think a lot of it is probably like frozen fruit and veg. They say there's very, very little lost because, and it can sometimes be more nutrient dense nearly than fresh, because as soon as it's picked, it's frozen and doesn't lose anything in transportation and so on. So that can be very good. And I freeze a lot. Like if you have, I make a lot of smoothies, and they're a great way to get your fruit and veg in. Always put your handful of leafy greens in. So I freeze a lot of my fruit. So if I have fruit that needs to be eaten and hasn't been eaten, I'll freeze it. Everything freezes. Even avocados, they're fantastic to freeze for smoothies because the way they're kind of unripe, and then suddenly ripe, and then if you don't eat them that day, they're kind of gone. So you can just peel them, cut them in half, seed them, and chop them, put them into a baggie or a container, and use them in smoothies. So anyway, I suppose in terms of nutrient content, I suppose it's how you can store them as well. And I think sometimes, if you want to kind of prepare, I'm very much a big advocate of batch cooking and prepping and freezing and kind of taking the stress out of cooking. Particularly if you're busy. So you can always kind of chop your veg and store them in water with a little bit of dash of salt, or sometimes a squeeze of lemon can help keep things fresh in the fridge as well. But don't let it there to go off, just eat it. That's the biggest thing. And meal plan. If you meal plan, you just buy what you need and consume it. I have very, very, very little food waste at the end of the week because I meal plan and I just shop to what I need. So it just is about getting wise with it, so and consuming it. Okay, so we'll go on to the next section then in terms of protein, because I'm sure you've all heard this question, and it's kind of funny, and I found this at the beginning when I went vegan, like particularly I suppose with my kids, I'd have friends who'd be, the kids would be going through McDonald's drive-through getting dizzy, and yet they'd be concerned about my kids and where my kids were getting, their nutrients. So it is funny when you're vegan, people are always kind of questioning, or curious is probably a better way to put it, in terms of what they're doing and how they're getting on. So it's kind of like this. But I suppose the thing with protein, you know, and I suppose we were indoctrinated, I'm sure most of you were like I was, that, you know, and still happening, you know, that meat equals protein or protein equals meat, that is, you know, where you get your protein. So yeah, animal protein or animal foods are a good source of protein. But so are plant-based foods have a fantastic source of protein and a much better source of protein for many reasons, which I'll talk about in a moment. But just to address some of the things too, you know, that are still here, but not as much. But, you know, before there was kind of the message that you had to kind of combine different foods to get an optimal protein or complete protein at each meal. Because different plant-based foods, they weren't complete, and that one food may not have all the amino acids that we need, which are what makes up protein. But that's not the case. Really, once you're eating a variety of foods and protein-based foods over the course of the day, you know you're bound to get your amino acids in, get all of them. So things like, you know, combining beans and rice, you know, would have been people would have thought in the same meal, but you could have your rice at lunch and your beans in the evening, and you're still getting that balance. So again, like it says there, it's eating a variety over the course of the day. We tend to way overconsume protein in the West. Even the World Health Organization would be quite conservative, recommend 10 to 15% of our calories from protein. Most people eat way more than that. The Irish guidelines recommend 0.8 gram per kilogram of body weight. Vegans need slightly more, just in terms of how the plant protein is broken down, and the amount of protein that can be absorbed from that. So I just recommend the easiest guideline is just think, you know, 1 gram per kilogram of body weight, and that's how much protein you need over the course of the day. Now, I don't get obsessive about it or about any macro counting or anything like that. I think once you eat a good variety of foods, you'll be fine. But if you are someone who kind of wants to keep an eye on your protein, just think of 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. So someone who's 80 kilos needs 80 grams of protein over the course of the day. And you can see here where you can get your protein from a massive range of sources. So you have your superfoods. Now, again, you wouldn't be consuming a lot of these. Generally, it would be a teaspoon or a tablespoon. So, you know, even though they're high in protein, you wouldn't be getting a lot of those. But you have your kind of, you know, your textured vegetable protein, you have your seeds, you have your nuts, you have your lentils, your nut butters, you know, your tempeh, your quinoa, your seaweeds, your tofu, which is a great source. My 13-year-old's turned into a tofu master, so we're having tofu heaven in this house at the moment. All kinds of amazing ways of having it. But and again, your fruits and vegetables, and not your fruits, your vegetables. People don't think of vegetables as a source of protein, but again, small amounts. You can see if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet over the course of the day, you're going to be getting more than sufficient protein. So you can rest assured, really, I think for the most part, once you're consuming these kind of foods, I really wouldn't be worrying at all. And getting a variety. And again, next to eating the fruits and vegetables, the next kind of take home I'd love you to have is to get variety no matter what you're eating, whether it's the vegetables or the fruit, whether it's your beans, that you're not just eating chickpeas all the time, that you're getting a mix, because they all have a different, slightly different nutrient profile. The same with your nuts, the same with your seeds. You know, just always trying to go for a little bit of variety in what you're eating, and then you'll be ticking off all the bases for sure. And as I mentioned, there's lots of benefits to plant-based protein as opposed to animal-based protein, aside from the poor animals, leaving that argument out of it. But from a health perspective, you know, plant-based protein has fiber, it's high in tons of vitamins and minerals. It's got lots of phytochemicals, antioxidants, plant steroids. All these things are really good in helping us age well and live longer and healthier. And no cholesterol, compared to, again, animal protein. No hormones or antibiotics or strange things being pumped around. And generally, you know, very low in fat, particularly saturated fats. So many advantages to choosing plant-based protein over animal-based protein from, again, just purely from the health perspective, aside from the obvious as well. And then I suppose not only advantages in terms of eating more plant-based protein, but because you're eliminating, you know, the animal protein, there's massive advantages from that as well. And again, this message isn't very strong out there, but we know that processed meats, you know, your full Irish, you know, has been given a group 1 classification when it comes to carcinogens, you know, so basically saying bacon causes cancer. But yet this message is very much dulled down and hidden. And the same with red meat. They've been given a class 2A classification, which pretty much means that they probably cause cancer. It's all indications are that it does, but we don't have sufficient evidence quite yet. So, and again, I think that will move up in time as well. And even the World Health Organization, this is back in 2015. And I remember when this came out originally, and I was delighted to see it. But if you Google it now, I'm glad of the screenshot, but it's very, you know, it got, there's a lot of strong reaction to it from industry, and it got kind of hidden amongst all the various other places that they hide things. So, but yeah, basically, I suppose it was the International Agency for Research in Cancer on behalf of the World Health Organization, and this classification, though, you won't see it too many places. So yeah. Again, many benefits to eliminating the meat from a health perspective, many benefits to including plant-based protein as well. And again, just reinforcing this, the British Medical Journal, again, quite a conservative journal, did a study and looked at mortality from various different causes associated with meat, and basically found that basically all-cause mortality and 9 specific causes of death, like the most common causes of death, heart disease, so on, were associated with both processed and non-processed red meat. So again, basically, the more red meat you ate, the higher your risk of 9 of the major causes of illness and disease, and the higher risk of death. So, I mean, it's just, and again, these are just some that I'm highlighting for you, but there's lots more behind all of these as well. Again, to show, I suppose, that you can get plenty of protein and be vegan in a vegan diet. So, I mean, there's numerous, and if you've seen Game Changers, you see lots of examples as well, from bodybuilders to all kinds of athletes that are plant-based or vegan, and across all sports. And you're seeing it more and more, and you're seeing whole soccer teams and basketball teams going vegan, and, you know, all kinds of amazing things happening now. And I suppose, you know, again, for whatever reasons, and probably from a sports perspective, a lot of them are, you know, it can be from health and performance. And again, a plant-based diet does help with performance and recovery, because it helps with recovery, and you get back training quicker the next day and harder the next day, and it reduces inflammation, because exercise and stress to the body causes inflammation, whereas a plant-based diet will help reduce that inflammation, rather than an animal-based diet, which would exacerbate the inflammation. So there's many scientific reasons, I suppose, in terms of why many athletes are moving towards a plant-based diet as well. So, any thoughts or comments on any of that so far? They're all still doing okay. A couple of questions there. I see. Can you provide a source of calcium? Yeah, I'm actually going to talk about calcium just now, so I'll hold that one till there, Cara. Regarding the HSC and guidance is changing, is this changing towards plant-based vegan foods and their plant-based mentions? Very slowly. I'm definitely seeing some evidence of it, but it's slow. But saying that, I've even, you know, HSC dietitians talking about climate change and recognizing that we need to be more aware of our food from kind of a more sustainable perspective, and starting to hear language changing that I would never have heard before. And yeah, so it is, but it's slow. And that's probably one of the last places for things to change, because it can be quite conservative. Why is the term vegetarian understood to include those who eat non-vegetable foods such as dairy products? Why is the term vegetarian? Okay. I suppose it's just a term that's there a long time, Paul. I suppose I don't know in terms of the history of it, but yeah, it is interesting when you look at it that way. But I suppose that's the term that's always been used, and I don't see it being changed now, but maybe somebody else might have a kind of more historical understanding there, but I think it's just, yeah, just the way it's evolved on that one, Paul. Okay, so I know we're kind of tight in time, so I'll run through these ones quite quickly. But again, just as there was question on calcium, I will address it. I suppose the whole calcium thing is it's really strange when you take a step back and look at it. I think it's just because we grew up with it, and milk is good for you, milk is good for your bones. It was just kind of what we were, and still, I see it in my kids' books and so on. It's still there, yeah, we're the only species who drink the milk of another mammal. It's just very strange when you stop and think about it. We produce breast milk for our babies and feed them, and also we just feed our babies breast milk for the first early years, and then wean them onto food. So not only are we the only species who drink the milk of other mammals, but we continue to do so into adulthood. So it's just a little, I don't know, when you take a step back from it, it can be a little bit odd. And if it was for the calcium, like deer milk has twice the calcium as cow's milk. So there's just, it's a very strange phenomenon, really, when you think about it, and particularly when there's so many good plant-based sources, and I'll share some of those with you now, Tara, as well, in terms of getting calcium. And again, it's similar to the plant-based piece versus the animal protein and the plant-based protein. Yes, dairy is a good source of calcium, but yes, there are numerous plant-based sources of foods that are a fantastic source of calcium too. Plus, they have many other health benefits as well. So yeah, and this is really what we're doing if you think about it. So it is, as I said, it's a very strange one. And often when I share the slide, people get really kind of nearly offended. But again, it's the reality of what's going on. So it's an interesting one. But yeah, in terms of plant-based sources of calcium, you can see here, again, your vegetables are great. Your tofu is a fantastic one. It's a good one. Some of your beans, particularly your kidney beans, almonds are a good source of calcium. So again, it's back to eating a variety of whole foods. If you're eating a variety of whole foods over the course of the day, you're going to be eating lots of calcium. You're going to be getting these in. Just to mention too, the kale would be a better source if it's calcium is the main thing that you're interested in. It's a better source of calcium than some of the other green leafies, I wouldn't say spinach, because more of the calcium from kale and broccoli, can be absorbed a higher percentage than it can be from spinach. So just to mention that. So again, you can just see that by calories, the amount of calcium that you can find in different foods, so versus milk. But again, eat a whole food plant-based diet, you'll be getting plenty of calcium. You don't need to worry. It's funny, I grew up, very much as a strong, drink your milk every day with your meal, and have your milk all the time. Really, that's what we drink, even more so than water. My mum has osteoporosis, my grand has osteoporosis, so I had osteopenia at a very young age. But since I went vegan, it just kind of stabilized and never got worse. So I'm due to go get a scan again now, so hopefully I won't be eating my words, but it definitely, and if you look at a lot of the research again with this, like the message is just so messed up, because if you look at the rates of hip fractures, which is often an indicator of osteoporosis, the countries with the highest intake of dairy have the highest hip fracture rates as well. So so I suppose in terms of eating, as I said, if you just eat a variety, you'll get plenty of calcium. Dark leafy veg, particularly your kale and your broccoli, are really beneficial. And if you're wondering, Tara, in terms of kids getting those foods in, smoothies are great. So I'll always have a handful of kale in my smoothies. So it's a great way to get your calcium in. And again, you're not cooking it or leaching some of the nutrients either. There's lots of, most soy milks now are fortified. Most plant-based milks really are fortified with calcium as well. Tofu is a great source. And as I told you, some of the other days, the things you need to watch out for if you are have osteoporosis or osteopenia would be just caffeine intake can affect the absorption of the calcium. So just watch out for that. You don't have your coffee straight after a meal, high in calcium. Have a little break, and obviously plenty of vitamin D to help as well. And weight-bearing exercise where you're on your feet. So walking, dancing, running, things like that are great for building bone strength as well. So iron, just to mention really briefly as well, again, eat a whole food diet, you're getting lots of iron, your beans are great and so on. Vitamin C is a great one to have with your iron. again, a lot of times, our bean casseroles will have tomatoes and they'll have beans. So a lot of the foods we generally tend to combine, there will be vitamin C and iron in them together. But it is just something to keep in mind to help really boost up to 3 to 6 times the absorption of iron. So again, you can see a variety of different food sources here that are good sources of iron. And you see the seaweeds there as well. Yeah, Tara, absolutely. Seaweeds are they're superfoods really. So, having any of those seaweeds in your diet are fantastic as well. And just very finally, vitamin D. And again, whether you're plant-based or not, really, you're living in Ireland, you need vitamin D supplementation. And really, they say anyone over the age of 50 really needs to supplement anyway, no matter what diet you're on. And iodine can be something we just need to be mindful of as well. And B12, we mentioned that earlier. So just a reminder again, plant foods, there is some B12 in some plant foods and some are fortified with B12. But food sources such as fermented foods and mushrooms and seaweeds and so on, they're not reliable sources of B12 really. And just as I said earlier, because the consequences are quite high with B12 deficiency, it's not worth taking the risk with. It really isn't. It affects the nervous system and the brain and so on. So yeah, you may not need it. You may have been like me and got away with it, or Roger got away with it. Unfortunately, you might be the one person who won't get away with it. So I would always recommend a B12 supplement. You can get lots of supplements now that are formulated for vegans that will have B12, but will have those kind of nutrients that I mentioned there, the ones that, if you're not eating really well, can tend to be a little lower, like your iron, your iodine, your vitamin D and calcium. So these, the the Vegan Society in the UK do a veg one supplement formulated for vegans, and then there's another company, just again, these are just 2 I happen to have used, and no links to them or anything, but they do a vegan vitamin and mineral mix as well that is quite a good one as well. So there are a couple there. So that's it. I'm 2 minutes to go. I'm doing well. So just a reminder, I suppose, yeah, it's all about nutrient density. It's looking at the food, trying to eat the rainbow food, the variety of food, and seeing the food as nourishing your body and giving you the energy to be out there and saving the animals and spreading the vegan message, and see it as kind of fueling you to live your passion and do what it is you want to do, and to be a good example, I suppose, of someone who's plant-based or vegan. So remember the 10 servings of fruit and veg. Really, as I said, if there's one thing you change tomorrow or tonight, is just to really start looking at where you can bring in more fruit and veg. It could be smoothies, I find, are a fantastic, quick and easy way. It could be adding, some berries and so on onto your porridge in the morning. It could be just having veggie sticks kind of chopped up in the fridge. It could be having a side salad with every meal. It could be just lumping loads of veggies into your dinner in the evening. So whatever it works for you, just look at how your current way of eating and how you can bring in more fruit and veg. And sometimes maybe just a little bit of prep if you've done up a fruit salad or fruit kebabs or something. If they're there, you're much more likely to eat them. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, your beans, peas, and lentils, your legumes, again, getting a variety of those, great sources of protein, iron, and so on. And your nuts and seeds, sometimes they're given a bad rap from the dieting industry. They would be a little bit higher in fat compared to some of the other foods in a plant-based diet, but we need, it's a good fat, but they're also a good source of antioxidants, which you don't often think about it with nuts and seeds. And again, a variety, having a variety, you can put them in your smoothies, great source of protein instead of the raw protein powders. You can sprinkle them on your breakfast cereal, you can have them, in salads and anything. So, or just a snack on, mid-morning, mid-afternoon. So don't forget the nuts and seeds. Obviously whole grains are better. And herbs and spices, remember them as well in terms of their nutrient value. We kind of tend to think of them more in terms of flavor, but if you're making a parsley pesto or something, they're green leafies, they're little green leafies, basil and there's great, iron, parsley is great, source of iron and so on. So use them as well in terms of from a nutrition perspective, and you'll be doing wonders for yourself. So just to summarize, if you're okay for me going over a couple of minutes, I mentioned Brenda Davis earlier. She's a dietitian that I really like. She's written 12 books, I think, now on vegan plant-based diets, but she's very evidence-based, very scientific, but yet, you know, presents it in an easy to understand format. But this is her diagram that I've been using for years. And as you can see from what I've mentioned earlier, it's very similar to the report from the Lancet as well. So it's just, no matter where you're looking, you know, the messages are kind of really coming consistent. And I love that she has a little section within the fruit and veg for green leafy veg, whereas the Lancet one doesn't. So bear that in mind. And you can see the way she split the fruit and veg here too. Some countries, I'm trying to think, is it France, New Zealand, I think, have actually separate recommendations for the number of servings of fruit versus the number of servings of vegetables, but the vegetables would always be slightly more. Excuse me. So just to bear that in mind as well. But obviously your whole grains, you know, your beans, peas, lentils, your calcium-rich foods, your nuts and your seeds, and your B12 up there as well. And of course the exercise. So that kind of, I suppose, summarizes everything in a sense. So again, if you're visual like me, or just take a screenshot of that or a picture of that and keep that to the forefront of your mind really, and hopefully it'll help you to feel more nourished, to feel healthier, to live longer, and to keep giving you the energy to do all the inspiring work that all of you do as well. So that's it. That's me. So thanks so much for your time. I'm just going to have a quick check on questions there. Dennis is asking, in terms of winning people over, what works best? Do you know, it depends. I think we all have a different skill set. I'll stop the share there. I think we all have a different skill set in terms of what we, is that me? No. Somebody, that's not me sharing that, is it? No. Somebody else is sharing, I think. Yeah. So I don't know if you wanted the Zoom piece. Is that somebody sharing that?
Bernie, I think that's your screen.
Hiya, Bernie.
Oh, it's grand. We'll chat away beside the Zoom. So in terms of winning people over, I think it's just different, and we all have different skill sets. And I suppose when I went vegan first, I was very passionate trying to convert everyone in different ways, and you know, I found the way that works for me now, and different people are out there doing amazing work. And I think if you follow your passion and what you're passionate about, you'll be inspiring people naturally that way. So whatever works for you to spread the message that you feel passionate about, go for it. And there's a place for everybody, and that's what I feel. You know, I look at so many people out there doing amazing work, you know, from, you know, the animal rights perspective or from environmental perspective, and I really admire them and support them. But I have my own way of doing what I do, and inspiring people and helping them convert to eating more plant-based. So I think follow your passion and do find the avenue that works for you. And I think there's a place for everybody, and there's people who need everybody. And there's people who need me and the way I am, and trying to spread the message. And there's people who need, you know, some amazing advocates and so on that are out there as well, doing their thing. So hopefully that answered that, Dennis. So where were we? Irish rugby team with some players in the North recent campaign, come play with your food, seems like strong plant-based message. I don't know, Roger, I'll have a look at that. I haven't come across it. But usually it takes one or two within a team, and if there's support there, it's amazing how it can spread. And there's some great examples of teams in the UK and the US that have gone completely vegan, which is amazing to see. Non-vegan, just curiosity, non-vegans are supplemented with B12 indirectly. Farmed animals are given no amounts of B12 and other supplements. Yeah, exactly. And I think so, but I think even like I said earlier, the research really is saying that once you're 50 and over, your ability to absorb it and use it decline anyway. So whether you're vegan or not vegan, we need the B12, but particularly if you're vegan, I think, because you're not getting, very rarely, you can't rely on what you're getting, let's say. And thanks, Tara. That's great. So yeah, I'm happy to stay on as long as people have questions, or or we can call it a day or a night, whatever people want to. And I'd love to hear if any of you have any suggestions or comments or things you'd like to share with the others as well. Feel free to chime in and share your experience. You're very shy.
We're a very shy bunch.
I have a feeling you're not Dennis somehow.
I am. I'm happy to listen. I'm a very happy listener. Thanks very much, Ailis. That was wonderful, very enlightening, very informative. I really enjoyed it, and give us great hope for the future. And I think where our webinars really score is when we put them up on YouTube and people come and visit them in their own time, and they're not under the pressure of being at a meeting, that they can look at it for a while and nip in and nip out. So I think it'll do well on that. And thank everybody for coming this evening. Great to meet everybody again, and new people and old friends too. It's lovely. And thank you, Ailis.
Not at all, Dennis, and thanks a million for having me on. And I'll just pop my email in there as well, because often people I find kind of think of a question later or tomorrow as they're kind of processing it, and I'm always happy to kind of answer and help out in any way I can. So my email is there, so if anyone thinks of a question later on or tomorrow or just wants a quick chat, or I don't know, not everybody answered the question at the start, maybe some of you are considering going plant-based or vegan, and just have one or two questions you might want to ask in this forum either. So feel free to drop me an email if there's anything you think of, even tomorrow or next year or whenever, and that might be more than happy to assist if I can.
That's lovely.
Great information.
No, it's great having the YouTube recording so that people can go in, as Dennis says, at their own leisure. And, you know, it's so informative and so helpful for people that are considering going vegan or going plant-based. You know, it's really good info there this evening. Thank you.
No problem at all. You're welcome. And thanks for having me on, guys. Best of luck with the work.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, Paul.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks very much. See you all again.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.